This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. We begin with this week's cattle market update with Oklahoma State livestock economist Derrell Peel. Derrell shares information on the markets from the last week and provides his expert insight on the latest cattle on feed report from the USDA. We continue our discussion on social media use in agriculture with K-State alumni and Kansas producers, the Peterson Farm Brothers. Greg, Nathan, and Kendal Peterson join us on the show to share how they got started in social media and the reason why they've continued to share content online 11 years later. We close today's show discussing methods to reduce bird strikes on windows with K-State wildlife specialist Drew Ricketts. Drew explains that worldwide, nearly 1 billion birds a year die from these collisions and highlights a research study that compared different window treatment options. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by Oklahoma State livestock economist Derrell Peel for our weekly cattle market update. So, Derrell, thanks so much for joining us on this Monday.
Yeah, it's happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate it. And this week, we're going to start off, as we always do, with a little bit of a market update from the past week. So, fed cattle, what did we see this past week?
You know, fed cattle markets are starting to pick up a little bit. We saw some strength, at least in the southern plains on a cash basis. I think across the board, a little bit higher prices. I think the reality of the feedlot numbers tightening up and just the broader situation is really starting to sort of take hold here. And, of course, it's the time of the year. Normally, we see fed cattle prices seasonally move higher through the first quarter. So some of that's probably a seasonal move as well. So it's a combination of an uptrend and some seasonal strength in this market.
Absolutely. And feeder cattle kind of the same?
Much the same thing. Feeder cattle markets definitely strengthened a little bit, at least in Oklahoma auctions. Our prices were up pretty much across the board. Again, for the lightweight calves, seasonally, we would be moving higher this time of the year. But I think this is really more about that uptrend, even more so than just the seasonal movement that we would normally expect to see. Broadly speaking, numbers are getting tighter, and that's becoming more and more apparent in the marketplace.
Sure, yeah, that overall trend more so taking hold, I guess, across the entire market, not just areas.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's taken a little while to kind of get all the pieces moving in the same direction because not everything happens at once across the different sectors, feeder cattle to fed cattle, as well as different parts of the country. But increasingly, we're kind of getting everybody on the same page here, and the supply fundamentals are really becoming more apparent that they're strengthening as we go forward.
Absolutely. And we're seeing the trend continue in our slaughter numbers that we've seen. Those are down.
Yeah, well, and, beef production is falling, and we've seen that this year. We knew from record levels last year that beef production would fall this year. We are seeing it. Slaughter numbers are beginning to come down. Depends a little on which category you look at. Across the board, on average, they're just about even with a year ago, but certainly we're seeing that, and they're going to fall from here. Beef production is down in part also because carcass weights are lighter. And so if you look at steer carcass weights, this last week's data, steer carcass weights are down 16 pounds year over year. Heifer carcasses are down about 20 pounds. Steady slaughter in the short run here and lighter carcass weights, that's what's driving the decrease in beef production for now. Later on, it'll just be shortage of numbers as we go forward. So, both of those things. And I suspect those carcass weights partly reflect some of the winter weather that we've had over the past few weeks, really going back to that December storm. And so undoubtedly, that's part of that as well. And obviously, we're seeing some additional winter weather across much of the country this week as well, this last week as well. So.
Absolutely. I guess also that concern for forage supplies or even hay in some parts of the area, hard to get your hand on this past year, really. So also hard to get weight on these animals.
That's right. Some guys are really scrambling for feed and, being fairly creative in some cases in ways that maybe is not nutritionally sound. But, people are scrambling to do what they can. And I've done several conferences in recent weeks and, obviously hay prices, but hay availability is really the biggest factor just in terms of how we're going to get through the rest of the winter, given how tight hay supplies are and the numbers of animals that some producers still have.
Sure. Unfortunately, just some inefficiencies there that we're seeing come to life in these numbers and what we're seeing. And on the flip side of that, I guess anticipating those slaughter numbers to continue decreasing is our box beef demand is up. Everyone is trying to grab what they can right now, right?
Yeah, box beef prices are strengthening. And, if you break it down and look beneath the box beef cutout, which is the aggregate value, and look at the individual cuts across the board, wholesale values really for all parts of the carcass are up. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking middle meats or end meats. In the last week or so, we've seen all of those move higher. And again, I think that's probably reflecting the supply fundamentals as much as anything. Demand is obviously still pretty good, and we'll continue watching that. And we're going to pressure demand in the sense that we're going to have to ration a smaller supply as we go forward. There'll be some impacts on consumers. Some people will change their behavior a little bit in terms of scrambling to find products. But, in the short run, those prices are moving higher and the supply will continue to support that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Glenn often talks about, his meat demand monitor here at K-State, and price is one of those things that heavily weighs into consumer decisions. So we were talking beforehand, the next 2 years are going to be kind of interesting to see how everything plays out. And I think that'll be one of those trends that we definitely see in the grocery stores. Yeah,
absolutely. Consumers, we talk about them trading down when things get too expensive, and they do some of that, and we eventually pick it up. It's kind of hard to see that a lot of that has happened yet. I think it's probably beginning in some ways, but I suspect we'll see a lot more of it going forward.
Absolutely. Well, now that we've kind of talked through the general market themes of the past week, let's talk about the latest cattle on feed report that dropped last Friday.
Yeah, the February cattle on feed report from USDA came in very much as expected for the most part. So we had placements down 4% on a year-over-year basis. Marketings were up 4%, and we're comparing the same number of business days this year and last year, so there's no difference because of that. The on-feed total for February 1st then is down 4% from a year ago. And again, it was pretty well anticipated. If anything, the placements maybe were a little bit smaller than expected, at least than the average trade guess. So, it probably reads us as a little bit bullish relative to expectations, perhaps. I don't know that it's a major bullish reaction that we'll see to that, but, it does definitely reinforce the idea that we're just continuing to tighten up these numbers.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not anticipating a huge market change here, like you said, a reaction. But I think as time goes on and people get a little bit more attuned to our markets, that'll probably be something, those little differences will make a huge difference probably, right?
Well, you never know. As people start to realize that we're just in a tighter situation all the way around, then they may start being more reactive to even relatively small changes. So it's always tough to anticipate how the market will react to these things. But, certainly it's going to continue the general support in the market from these tighter supplies.
Sure. And I guess going forward, weather is going to continue to be one of those things we look out for in the broad scheme of things as we hope to enter spring here soon. I know we often talk about that, but still just anticipating, like you said, some worse weather out here, winter weather in the West, but hope for that to cease here soon, right?
Well, yeah, we could still have significant weather left, and that's a real issue for a lot of cattle producers that are, really kind of stretched on available hay or forage supplies, trying to figure out how they can get through the winter. So, how much more winter we have could be a pretty critical question for these guys going forward. That may determine whether we see some additional liquidation being forced on some of these guys, even to get through the winter. And then, of course, longer term, we're looking at what does the next growing season look like? And are we going to see some improvement in some of the drought conditions that will give us some better odds for just generally a better growing season going forward this year?
Absolutely. We're a Kansas-focused show, obviously, but Oklahoma has had its fair share of drought here lately, too. So has that looked like it's improved any in your neck of the woods?
It has a little bit, actually. We've lightened up our drought conditions a little bit. We've had moisture. The southeast corner of Oklahoma is actually out of drought now. They've gotten quite a lot of moisture, but the bulk of the state is still in some level of drought, but we've lightened it up a little bit. Certainly gives us a little bit of hope that maybe things are going to turn around here as we go forward. We're certainly not out of the drought at this point, but we're moving in the right direction, at least here in the short run.
Derrell, I know that you are always on the go, going to different conferences, speaking at different events. So when you're interacting with producers, what are some of the common concerns that they have as of late?
It's funny because obviously the price outlook for the cattle markets is quite bullish. I mean, where we are with cattle numbers, and particularly as we get kind of all the sectors on the same page as we talked about. The expectations are there. It's priced into the feeder cattle market. If you look at feeder cattle futures, there's a healthy uptrend in prices built into that market for the rest of the year. All of that said, when you talk to producers, I think the first response I get back from them is, yeah, okay, cattle prices are higher, but input costs are so much higher. Cost of production is high. Is it going to be enough to make it really work? Obviously, that's a question going forward. Depending on what part of the country you're in, you're looking at different kinds of inputs and different levels of input needs. But I think that's where producers' focus is in the short run is on that cost side and managing the cost of those inputs. And of course, one of the things that's going to happen in cattle markets as we go forward, feeder cattle prices, the prices of cattle we're selling are going to be high. But to the extent that we try to rebuild after we see some improvement in drought conditions, these female prices are going to be extremely high at some point in time. And that probably starts here in the next few months. Towards the end of the year, I think we'll start to really see that. And so on top of feed costs and hay costs and all of the other input, fertilizer, whatever producers are using, those replacement female costs are going to be very high at some point in time here.
Reproductive efficiencies are going to become more and more important, I have a feeling, here in the near future. And not that it's not something producers are already thinking about most of the time, but I think the emphasis is really going to be there coming soon. Yeah,
it sure will. And, ultimately for producers, it's about profits or returns possibilities, not just prices. And so in the situation we find ourselves now where input markets have been so high and pretty volatile in many cases, that's where a lot of their focus is lying. And that's the part they can do the most to manage. So it actually makes sense for them to be focused on that. The market's going to do what the market's going to do, but producers really can put their management focus on managing those costs and cost of production.
Absolutely. Yeah, controlling what you can in these instances, always a great way to focus your energy. But Derrell, as always, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to do it anytime.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was Oklahoma State livestock economist Derrell Peel joining us for this week's cattle market update. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. I'm joined now by three special guests. They are the Peterson Farm Brothers. I'm sure many of you tuning in are familiar with them. They are Greg Peterson.
Hello, I'm Greg.
Nathan Peterson.
Hello.
And Kendal Peterson.
Hello.
Thank you guys all for joining me today. I appreciate your time. I know you are very busy, and we'll get into some of the busyness here in a moment, I'm sure. But first and foremost, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. It's nice and breezy outside today, but we've been getting some work done here on the farm, so.
Wonderful. Well, like I said, you guys stay busy not only because of the agricultural production that goes on at your family farm, but also because of some of the social media work that you all do. I've been talking to a K-State expert earlier and now several other people involved in ag social media spaces. And you guys have been a huge part of that platform here in Kansas specifically, but you have K-State roots, right?
Yeah, so I graduated from K-State in 2013, majoring in ag communications and also minoring in music performance.
And I graduated in 2016 in ag technology management.
And then I graduated in ag economics with a minor in animal science.
A lot of diversity in majors there, too. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we kind of did that on purpose. We were hoping to all three farm together and wanted to make sure we all had different backgrounds coming into it. Also, we're all different people, even though we're brothers, so we have different interests.
Absolutely. That makes sense for sure. And you mentioned, Greg, that your major was in ag communications, right? Your main major. So is that kind of what led to this social media platform that you all have today?
Yeah, it definitely was a big part of how we got started. Actually, it was my junior year of college at K-State. I was in a class about social media, and social media was really kind of a new thing at that point in 2011, 2012. And so we were talking about how, you can use social media to promote agriculture and brainstorming different ideas. And I remember in class coming up with the idea to make a music video, but it wasn't a class project or anything. It was just brainstorming. And it wasn't until that summer, once school was out, that I actually went through with the idea. But it was definitely inspired by class discussions.
So that's really how your platform started, right? Were these musical parody videos that you all would do on the farm. And at first, were you, Kendal and Nathan, were you guys like, I don't know how I feel about this?
Yeah, so we were still in high school, or when we made it, I had just graduated high school. So yeah, it was kind of like putting ourselves out there as like, what will our friends think or whatever, but we just have always had fun on the farm and been proud to be from a farm. So it was a way in our minds, like just to be able to show simply, what we do on the farm, and showing it is always easier than, telling someone. We decided to go through with it, even though Greg's idea kind of sounded a little crazy at first, but older brothers get their way, and we decided to help him out. And we had a lot of fun as brothers,
A great way to bond then, Kendal, would you say?
There's actually like several minutes worth of outtakes videos from each of the first of our videos, just because we weren't like pressed for time or anything. We were kind of goofing off a little bit. And we thought that was a good way to showcase. I mean, we were just farmers, and we were still transitioning into kind of like leadership roles. We weren't in charge of parts of the farm when we were in high school like we are now. So when we film now, it's a little bit more sophisticated. We have kind of a deadline and have to manage our time a little bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah, you guys are busy producers outside of all of this, in addition to all the work that you all do and other business aspects that have built off of this platform. So you mentioned that this was a way for you to share about agriculture in kind of a fun way. Is that the goal of all of the videos that you guys do? Is that the message behind, is education, but also, hey, we have fun too?
Yeah, and really, I think it actually starts with the fun. It starts with the entertainment. That's our connection to people. That's what gets people watching, whether that's people in agriculture or really our goal is that people outside of agriculture will watch our videos. So that's kind of our goal from the start, is to entertain and draw people in, and then bring in the education, whether that's through our informational videos or through our blogs or through some of our posts on other platforms besides YouTube. That's the ultimate goal, is to provide education for people, but entertainment's kind of where it starts.
Sure. And those vlogs provide an inside look really at your day-to-day lives, right? It's not just the parody videos, which are so fun and obviously show glimpses of what it's like on the farm, but the vlogs are more in depth.
Yeah, the vlogs show a lot more of the details behind the production. A lot of times those videos, they're short clips. I mean, the parodies, they're short clips. They're moving really fast. They're showing a lot of different things happening. Versus a vlog is going to kind of show the details of what it took before getting to the field and the communication that it takes. And just definitely more of the mundane things. It's not all highs. There's some lows and stuff that we include in those videos, and problems you have to come across and solve each day.
And for me, the vlogs, like Kendal was saying, maybe it's more boring stuff, but making a vlog out of it, like, helps you remind yourself, like, oh, let's make this fun, even though it's maybe a mundane task. Some people have never seen this before, have no idea what moving cattle or working cattle is like. And it kind of reminds you to have a little fun with it and remember, why you do what you do, and just to enjoy what you're doing.
Although sometimes the cattle, they don't act very well while being filmed. We kind of joke that it's bad luck when you have your GoPro out and you're trying to film catching cattle or doing something. There's always one that misbehaves. And
yeah. We call it the GoPro curse. The cattle will misbehave as soon as you get the camera out.
They're camera shy. Yeah. That's awesome. So have you found that you're cultivating a lot of conversation with your videos? You mentioned that non-ag demographics are kind of your target audience. So are you seeing that this is cultivating change in those communities?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see in the comment section of your videos, you kind of get a taste of who's watching and what they think. And we don't always have time to read all the comments or respond to all of them, but you definitely get a lot of conversations happening, especially maybe if the post is a little more controversial in nature, something that, is kind of a hot topic or kind of buzzword type thing. And so, I think there's definitely been a lot of conversations happening there. I do think that there's probably a lot of conversations that we never even know happen. Like if you think about, we have teachers all the time tell us that they play our parody videos in school and to their class. And so you think about all these elementary school students around the country that are talking about agriculture after watching one of our videos. And so it's hard to know for sure how many conversations are generated, but you definitely get a feel for what people are saying.
Excellent. That must be so rewarding for you all, especially because that was the goal, right? Was to kind of offer those audiences glimpse into what it's like on farms and the day-to-day operations of being a family farm. It's kind of showing, this is what agriculture really looks like today.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we're still doing it 11 years later, is because we've been to a lot of classrooms and schools too to perform them. But it's cool that the videos can go farther than we can. We travel around and we're a part of showcasing agriculture in our farm in that way. But the videos can go a lot farther than we can and have a lot more views, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, a little bit more of a digital impact, right? That digital footprint. So if listeners are tuning in, this is a show that's generated for producers across Kansas, and they've been kind of curious about getting involved in social media, but they're not really sure why or what to really post about. What would your words of encouragement be for them?
Well, I would just say to be authentic and just, just showcase what you're doing. 11 years ago when we got started, we felt like we were some of the only farmers on YouTube, whereas 11 years later, there are tens of thousands of farmers on, whether that's YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And those people creating content range from people that are just kids to older farmers to everyone in between. And everyone has kind of a different style of making videos. Some people are funny. Some people are, informational. Some people are just, cool visual style kind of things to where you just kind of have to find what your brand is. And, maybe not everyone's cut out for it either. I always tell people that if you want to make a difference, you don't have to use social media. You can also just have conversations with people or invite people to your farms or work with different organizations around you to help promote agriculture. So it takes everything working together. It's not just one type of video or one type of way of doing it.
Absolutely. So generating impact in a multitude of ways. Like you said, it can even be outside of social media. And if producers are even worried about that, they're like, I don't feel like it's my job to do that, or I don't think I'd be the right voice. What would you say to that?
I think everyone has a story, every farm has a story and why they do what they do, and everyone's trying to get better at what they do. And I think, just showing that and telling that, maybe just locally you're sharing, but that still makes a difference. And I think people are interested in what's going on around the country. And I think everyone has a story to tell, in one way or another. And we can all be proud of what we do. And hopefully, we all enjoy our jobs and can showcase, talk about it, and tell the story of our farm.
I think, honestly, and this is a trap we fall into as well, like it's not always about what you're doing. It's more about who you are. People are really interested in your personality and your family and the people who are behind raising their food, not necessarily the ways they're doing it. They want to learn about that too, but they want to learn about you first. And so we always try to remind ourselves to let people into your lives and let them see who you are and what you do. And along the way, you can explain what you're doing.
Putting a face to agriculture, a great message there for sure. So Peterson Brothers, if listeners are tuning in and they haven't heard your videos before, which I doubt there's very many out there that haven't seen them, or if they're interested in learning more about you and your family, where can they do that at?
Across multiple social media sites would be at Pete Farm Bros. That would be Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. And then PetersonFarmBrothers.com is our website. The YouTube handle is Peterson Farm Bros. And Facebook and TikTok is at Peterson Farm Bros.
Excellent. Well, I will link to all of those resources in our show notes of today's program, which can be found on agtoday.net as always. But Greg, Nathan, Kendal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was the Peterson Farm Brothers joining us for a conversation on social media and agriculture. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We're ending this Monday's show as we always do with this week's wildlife segment. Joining us for that this week is K-State wildlife specialist Drew Ricketts. So Drew, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Samantha.
Absolutely. So this week we're going to be talking about birds and specifically cases where they're running into windows.
Yeah, we are. And bird strikes to windows are something that frequent, at least several questions a year that I get, usually folks in urban areas, but also rural and suburban residents too will have birds that run into the windows. And there's sort of two kinds of these bird strikes. One of them is where the bird doesn't know the window is there and just runs into it. And those can be lethal to the bird sometimes. The other are birds that are seeing their reflection in a reflective surface and sort of beating their beak on the window because they're trying to get at a competitor. And the study that we're talking about today is more to try and avoid those bird strikes where the birds are flying through the window because they can't see it there.
I think people might be thinking, like, this isn't that big of a deal, but it's quite impactful in terms of bird populations, right?
Yeah, it is. So worldwide, there's about 1 billion birds that die every year because of strikes to windows, which was a surprising number for me to find out.
Yeah, that's a large number of birds each year. So going into the study that we're about to talk through, there's several different types of window treatments available that they looked at.
There are. So this study that we're talking about today mainly looked at window films that allow the window to still look and function as a window. A lot of times when I'm helping homeowners, I will suggest some films that have a caricature of an animal on them or some sort of picture that allows the bird to see that that whole surface is not open. Or we might think about putting some newspaper on the window or that sort of thing. But a lot of folks don't want to obstruct their windows, and these industrial treatments would allow that to happen. There's two kinds. One of them was called bird shades, and the other one is called bird shield. And the bird shield still, if you looked at it very closely, would have some sort of pinstripe designs on it. You'd see stripes, and the birds can see those really well. Makes that window not look like a clear surface anymore. The bird shades uses a frequency of light that we can't see, but the birds can, and it makes them look striped as well.
Interesting. So some cool technology going on there with those treatments. And when it came to the results of this study, walk us through kind of the process they used and then what they actually found.
Sure. So what they were looking at, apparently there's a fair bit of concern about how effective these treatments are when they're applied to the outside of the window and also when they're applied to the inside of the window, because a lot of windows we can't reach. And so folks will apply these treatments to the inside instead of the outside for convenience. So they compared the effectiveness of the two treatments to untreated glass when the film was applied to the outside of the glass, and then they also did the same comparison when the film was applied to the inside of the glass. What they saw was that the bird shades increased window avoidance by about 50%, and the bird shield increased window avoidance by about 40% when those products were applied to the outside of the window. So they are effective at reducing bird strikes. 50% doesn't sound like all that much, but when we think about 500 million birds that could be avoided dying, then that's a lot, right? And then what they also saw was when they applied those treatments to the inside of the windows, they saw a drastic reduction in effectiveness. And so even though it's not convenient, when we're thinking about applying something to a window to keep a bird from hitting it, it's going to be important to apply that to the outside of the window rather than the inside.
Absolutely. So when it comes to recommendations for people that are interested in doing this on their own, what do you have for them?
Well, I would say that if you want your window to still look exactly like a clear window, that these sorts of films could be very effective. They're generally made for industrial applications, but you could purchase them for a house, get up on a ladder, put it on the outside of the window, or potentially open the window and put it on the outside of the window if you can reach out. But like I said before, there are also some pictures that might also look like a bird, or there's stickers, not pictures, or a sticker that looks like a flower, or some of these sorts of things that we could also apply to the outside of the window rather than the inside, even if it's inconvenient to try and get those birds to stop running into the windows.
Wonderful. Well, Drew, I'm excited to share this with my grandmother. I know she always feels bad with birds running into her window, so I'm sure listeners gleaned some great insight from this conversation. So thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was K-State Wildlife Specialist Drew Ricketts providing insight on birds running into windows and some techniques to help mitigate that. That concludes today's programming. We'll be back with more tomorrow on Agriculture Today.